alaikum and good evening. Viewers, wherever people of different religions live in close proximity to each other, religious sectarianism can often be found in varying forms and degrees. Sectarian violence between the two major sects of Islam, Shia and Sunni, has occurred in countries like Pakistan, Iraq, Afghanistan, Bahrain, Lebanon and Somalia. Unfortunately, this 10th of Muharram in Rawalpindi incident, sectarian tensions have once again flared up in Pakistan. The country is already going through a tough phase. The menace of terrorism has wreaked havoc on the fragile economy of the country, and common person is thinking that this new phenomena of sectarian war will add to the miseries of an average Pakistani. Scholars say intolerance is a political act of revenge, vengeance and conquest. It has nothing to do with religion Islam, because it actually works against what Islam teaches us. If Muslims are ever forced to live under one single sect states, they will no longer be true Muslims, because Islam does not allow that. It teaches you the tolerance, but who will remember the true religion when one sect after another is being eliminated by the fires of extremism? Why sectarianism is tearing Pakistani societies apart? Common person is failing to understand why people try to interfere in the matters of others. Why do they wish to impose their views of religion on others? How can Pakistani people fight effectively to turn the table around of this sectarian war induction through external factors and tools like social media? We will explore all the aspects of this sectarian violence in Muslim world, and we will also talk about the Middle Eastern Muslim countries, how and what countries have been torn apart on the grounds of this sectarianism. Today we have Zaid Hamid with us. We will discuss all the aspects of sectarianism. Assalamu alaikum, Zaid Hamid sahab. As you can see, that we would like to know this sectarianism, this factor of sectarian, which is tearing apart all the Muslim countries. If you go from Afghanistan to Lebanon, all this Muslim belt has been affected. As you can see, that if we analyze the Muslim world, all the Muslim Middle Eastern countries, this sectarian factor has played a very important role in demolishing them. So how do you see this sectarianism and then challenging this factor to the Muslim world?
You see, let's see the bigger picture first. The fact of the matter is that the entire Muslim world is being reshaped. It's not reshaping itself, it is being reshaped. Forces which have come into this region from outside, external forces, are actually getting involved in the greater Middle East, and they are reshaping the politics and the geography of the Muslim heartland. That's the reality. This is the fact. In 2002, an American colonel, Rolf Peters, released a map of the new Middle East, of the new Muslim world, which they proposed to make in the next decade or so. And that came out in almost 2002. So the decade is almost there now. And whatever has happened ever since 2002 is exact manifestation and application of that map which was published in US Army Journal. And that map clearly divided the Muslim world, reshaped it, remapped it, suggested that Muslim land should be redrawn on bloodlines and sectarian lines. There were two major criteria were given for redrawing the maps of the Muslim world. Either the Muslim lands should be redrawn on bloodlines, which means Balochistan should be on Baluchis should be given an independent state of Balochistan, taking some Balochistan from Pakistan, Afghanistan and Iran, turn a Balochistan into an independent state, not based on religion but based on ethnicity. Similarly, Kurdistan should be created into a state, taking lands from Afghanistan, taking land from Iran, taking lands from Iraq, taking lands from Turkey, and converting Kurdistan into an independent, autonomous state, not on the basis of religion, but on the basis of ethnicity. But similarly, the whole Muslim world was also divided on the basis of sectarian lines. For example, Iraq was divided into three smaller countries: Shia Iraq, Sunni Iraq, and Kurdistan.
And Kurds, right.
This is where we see both these axes, ethnic axis and sectarian axis, coming into play, which were actually later on we saw after 2004, which were deployed in Iraq exactly on the same lines as Ralph Peter had suggested 2 years earlier, that this is how you should redraw the maps of the Muslim world, exploiting the internal sectarian frictions and ethnic rivalries. Now, that's why they say that Pashtuns of Afghanistan should be enlarged into greater Pashtun land. Pashtunistan, the tribal areas of Pakistan, merged into Afghanistan's Pashtun land, and you create a greater Pashtunistan, Baluchistan, and similarly you truncate Pakistan, you divide Pakistan, make it a smaller state. A dismemberment of Pakistan, as we call the Yugoslavia doctrine, that was suggested. And ever since that time, if you look at that map, Iraq was, Lebanon, Syria, all those Muslim lands were actually dismembered on various lines, ethnic or sectarian or religious. So whatever
the major separation that happened, if we let's suppose if we take Iraq, which holds an average of 63% Sunnis and approximately 32% Shias, so they divided Iraq on the sectarian basis.
Sectarian and ethnic, because Kurdistan is almost a separate state now. And Kurdistan, even though they are Sunnis, but their ethnic nationality is more dominant over their religious identity of being a Sunni. So Kurds are completely separate identity. They don't speak Arabic. They are a Kurd-speaking nation. They're not an Arabic-speaking nation. So on the basis of language, they were separated from Iraq and now almost an autonomous region of Kurdistan, which is now expanding, which slowly is expanding into Syria and Turkey and Iran. So now a Kurdistan, a greater Kurdistan, now you see like greater Baluchistan or greater Pashtunistan. So what we are saying is that while sectarian frictions existed within the Muslim lands, but to deploy these sectarian frictions and ethnic rivalries as a strategic weapon of dismemberment of the Muslim Middle East, that started after 9/11. When the so-called American war on terror was deployed in the Muslim heartland, starting up from Afghanistan, right, going up to Syria and Lebanon and Egypt that you see today. So the question now which comes here is that even though we acknowledge, fully accept that sectarian rivalries existed within the Muslim lands, but these rivalries were never so serious as to dismember Muslim lands, Muslim countries. But now the fact is that they are being deployed as a major weapon of redrawing of maps. And for that, foreign forces, external forces are heavily involved, like Americans, NATO, Russians, Western forces primarily. But
then, Mr. Zaid Hamid, the question here comes is that why are these Muslims letting the outside factors use this sectarian tool for dividing them?
You see,
why can't they see it?
Exactly. You see, that takes us, we'll have to go back slightly into history, somewhere like in 1979. You see, in 1979, 3 major events took place within the Muslim heartland. People tend to forget that, but this is something you have to keep in mind to understand everything exactly what is happening today. In 1979, Soviet invasion of Afghanistan took place. And Afghanistan was occupied. As a result, Afghan jihad began. And Afghan jihad was dominantly a Sunni resistance movement. All the 6 Mujahideen parties which were resisting the Soviets were based in Pakistan. And they were almost, out of those 6 parties, 5 were Pashtuns, 1 was a Tajik, but they were all Sunni parties. And those Sunni resistance actually started to fight in Afghanistan. At the same time, almost in 79, Iranian revolution takes place. The Shah was overthrown, Iranian revolution took place in Iran. And Iranian revolution was clearly a Shia revolution. From a sectarian point of view, it was a Shia revolution. So what happens is that in 79, in Afghanistan, you have a Sunni militancy building up. In Iran, you have Shia militancy building up because the state becomes Shia overnight. The Shah was overthrown. Simultaneously, in 79, Iraq invades Iran also. Iran-Iraq war also starts. That's the third dimension.
Exactly, yeah.
So 3 major earth-shaking, history-creating, map-changing events take place in 1979. Soviet invasion, Iranian revolution, and to stop the Iranian revolution, the Arabs, the Iraqis, attack the Iranians. on behalf of the Americans, on behalf of the Western powers. So basically what the Iran-Iraq war, what actually turned out to be, it did not remain a war between two countries. It did not remain a war between Iran and Iraq. It became a war between Arabs and Persians, and more threateningly, it became a war between Sunnis and Shias.
Shia and Sunnis, right.
So entire Sunni world was supporting Iraq, and entire Shia axis, Shia belt. There were no Shia country as such at that time, but there were Shia pockets, where they were in Lebanon, they were in Pakistan, they were in Afghanistan. They started to support Iran. And this war of Iran and Iraq.
But Iran does hold almost 91% of Shia sector.
See, that's what I'm saying. Every country, even every Sunni country every Sunni majority countries has Shia pockets, and and Iran has Sunni pockets. Point is, on a larger axis, on a larger plane, in a bird's eye view, if you take of the whole region, in Afghanistan there was Sunni militancy, in Iran there was a complete Shia militancy, and Iran-Iraq war brought the Shia and Sunni militants against each other. So the sectarian wars actually began in the Muslim world because of the Iran-Iraq war, and all these wars lasted 10 years.
Yeah, that was
the Afghan war lasted 10 years. Iran-Iraq war lasted 10 years. But Iran and Iraq war, what it did was that it created the Arab-Persian Shia-Sunni rivalry all across the Muslim heartland, from Lebanon to Pakistan. In Pakistan, the Iraqi embassy, on one hand, was actually supporting the Sunni militant groups to fight those pro-Iranian Shia groups in Pakistan. So proxy wars started to come into Pakistan at that time. Saudis were funding it, Iraqis were funding it. From the other hand, Iranians were funding their Shia groups in Pakistan. Sectarian wars in Pakistan, there were sectarian differences in Muslim world for the last 1400 years, just like Catholics and Protestants for hundreds of years.
They're not as extreme.
They would never be violent.
Today.
No, they would never be violent.
Right.
They would be academic, they would be argumentative, maximum they would throw stones at each other. That's about it. But turning them into hostile militant groups which started assassinating groups from Shia on the sectarian lines, that started in the 80s, as we said, because of these three major conflicts which erupted in the region at the same time. And again, remember one thing, very categoric, very clear, particularly in Pakistan, that the war is not between Shias and Sunnis in Pakistan. This you need to understand. Non-Muslims find it, we'll have to make this point more clear. Shias are one sect, agreed. And in all over Muslim world, Muslim societies has been living very harmoniously. In Pakistan, for example, in Pakistani armed forces, there are Shias. In Pakistan overall, Shias are about 12%. But there was never any conflict between Shias and Sunnis. In the armed forces, in the governments, in the schools, in the offices, in the businesses, in the trade, everybody would always live side by side. No problems, absolutely.
Right, in a nice, friendly manner.
Not always. So, within the Sunnis, there are different subsects also. One sect is called Ahle Hadith or Salafis, which are more indoctrinated from the Saudi Arabian doctrine. There is one sect which is called Barelvis, which are more softer, more Sufi inclined, mystic oriented. There is another sect called Deobandis. And then of course there is the sect of Shias. So in Pakistan, the actual militancy, the actual conflict is only between few groups of Deobandis and few groups of Shias. Even not all Deobandis are involved in militancy, not all Shias are involved in militancy. It's actually not a Shia-Sunni war, it's a war between proxy groups, few militant armed proxy groups of Deobandis and few proxy groups of Shias. And those groups, those particular Deobandi groups which are actually waging the sectarian war in Pakistan are also the ones which are waging the war against the state itself. The Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, the umbrella militant organization which is waging a war against the state of Pakistan, which is funded from CIA, which is funded by RAW, which is funded by foreign forces, and 100,000 Pakistanis have died. 100,000, and mostly Sunni Pakistanis have died at the hand of Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, which claims to be a Sunni organization. Its umbrella group, it's a mother umbrella group which is waging the war against the state of Pakistan. Within this Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, you have smaller militant groups like Lashkar-e-Jhangvi. these militant Sahaba, these militant groups are the ones who are actually waging a sectarian war. Why Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan is waging a war against the state of Pakistan, its subgroups, smaller groups are waging a sectarian war. And all this war in Pakistan which is taking place, and in fact all over the Muslim world that is taking place, you would find it is always a proxy war where foreign forces are funding and supporting various religious, these ethnic, sectarian groups. Like for example, right now the finest example or the worst example, painful example would be of Syria, where all the Sunni groups are being supported by NATO, and all the Shia groups and the government is being supported by Russia. Regime and Russia. And the joke in the Middle East is, are you a NATO Sunni or a Russian Shia? And this is the unfortunate part, because
that's at the brink of breaking up.
And this is what is happening.
It depends, Bashar al-Assad, how long
you see, this is what is happening. And at various places in the Muslim world, external forces like Americans and Russians and Indians and Israelis have been playing on sectarian lines. Dividing the Muslim world on sectarian lines is one of the most critical strategic objective of the US foreign policy today. Let me make it very clear to you now. Because, for example, the Muslim world, they cannot destroy it, implode it from within with an invasion. They cannot invade every Muslim land. So how would they destroy the Muslim world from within? They have to create proxy groups. Some proxy groups like Al-Qaeda, like Ayman al-Zawahiri, like those groups which are TTP, those groups like Free Syrian Army, who are destroying the states from within. And within them they create sectarian groups which divide the countries on sectarian lines, as they did in Iraq, for example.
Mr. Zaid Hamid, you just said that, okay, if we start from the top, you said that US is behind this, who injects the proxy groups in the countries, and then they go ahead and create a sectarian environment in the country. But do we see US on the top, and then comes the other Muslim countries within the Muslim world that are also supporting US in accomplishing its goals?
Exactly. You see, as we said, it is the US grand strategic objective to play on the sectarian card. There is no doubt about this. But to achieve that, they need proxy states also. For example, Saudi Arabians and Iran, playing on the fears of Iran, playing on the fears of Saudi Arabia. This is what the Americans do. For example, in Afghanistan, giving you an example, in Afghanistan the government was of Taliban, and Taliban were hardcore Sunnis, and Shias in Afghanistan had very serious problems with Afghan Taliban. So while the Americans invaded Afghanistan, the Shias of Iran and Iran actually supported the Americans to destroy the Afghan Taliban. That's why here you see an example where Iranians were actually supporting the Americans. On the other hand, similarly, in Iraq also, Iranians supported the Americans to destroy Saddam Hussein, who was Sunni, because Iranians felt a threat from Afghan Taliban and Saddam Hussein both. But on the other hand, in Syria, we see Americans going against the Iranians, and Iranians taking a stand to protect Bashar al-Assad regime, and Americans are supporting the Sunnis in Syria, while the Americans were supporting the Shias in Iraq. So this is what is happening, playing on the fears of Iranians and Saudis. Right. Americans are able to manipulate the Muslim land into various proxy wars. Right. So while the American agenda is there, the problem within the Muslim leadership is there, but the result is that on ground you have proxy groups. Still, let me make it very clear. Within the Muslim lands, there is no Shia-Sunni problem. It's not like Belfast in Northern Ireland, where Catholics and Protestants fight with each other. The whole city is divided and people fight with each other. In Pakistan and Muslim lands, this problem does not exist. It's only about the proxy groups.
Few proxy groups. Mr. Zaid Hamid, we will continue our discussion right from here. Viewers, stay with us. We'll be right back after a short break. Viewers, we are talking on a very, very important factor that is happening in Pakistan and in the other Muslim countries, that why sectarianism is tearing Muslim societies apart. What's the difference between Shia and Sunni Muslims, and how the outside factors are benefiting from this sectarian factor among Muslims. Before we go back to our discussion, we would like to show you a documentary created by James Steele, in which he exposes the usage of Iranian Shiites against Iraq in the Iran-Iraq war, and how the foreign factor is exploiting Muslims against each other. Let's have a look at that, and then we will continue our discussion.
tells the story of one Colonel James Steele, a veteran of the Latin American Dirty War and the Vietnam War, and his involvement in the Iraq War. Apparently, Colonel Steele was involved in helping organize and finance Shia death squads, torture, helping to instigate, perhaps, the civil war in Iraq. His reports went directly to the desks of Rumsfeld and Cheney.
First to fight for the right and to build the nation right, and the army goes rolling along.
This is one of the great untold stories of the Iraq War. How, just over a year after the invasion, the United States funded a sectarian police commando force that set up a network of torture centers to fight the insurgency. It was a decision that helped fuel a sectarian civil war between Shia and Sunni that ripped the country apart. At its height, it was claiming 3,000 victims a month. This is also the story of James Steele, the veteran of America's dirty war in El Salvador. He was in charge of the U.S. advisors who trained notorious Salvadoran paramilitary units to fight left-wing guerrillas. In the course of that civil war, 75,000 people died and over 1 million people became refugees. Steele was chosen by the Bush administration to work with General David Petraeus to organize these paramilitary police commandos. This is the only known Iraqi video footage of Steele, a shadowy figure, always in the background, observing, evaluating. The man on his left is his collaborator, Colonel James Kaufman. He reported directly to General David Petraeus, who funded this police commando force from a multi-billion-dollar fund. The thousands of commandos that Steele let loose came to be mostly made up of Shia militias, like the Badr brigades, hungry to take revenge on the Sunni supporters of Saddam Hussein.
Mr. Zaid Hamid, as you saw, this is the documentary made by BBC and The Guardian on this Colonel James Steele of U.S., and he was the member of the U.S. advisory team in the Iraq War. Now that we have these proofs that there is an involvement of U.S. factor, like you were explaining us, and how they exploit the factor of sectarianism among Muslims. So tell us this, that if there is no fight between Shia and Sunnis, like you said before going on a break, then what is the problem? What are their major differences?
You see, this video confirms every word that we have said. It is part of the US foreign policy to burn down Muslim lands through sectarian wars. And if there are no sectarian wars present, they will create more. They will create militant groups, militias, groups, terrorist gangs, which would fight each other, which would fight within each other to give the impression that the entire Muslim society is burning with sectarian wars. This is in Basra. During the Iraq War, there are recorded, documented examples of British SAS, British Special Forces, dressed up as Sunnis, planting car bombs in Shia districts of Basra. They were caught by the Shia militiamen of Basra. They were put in jail, and the British army had to attack the jail to relieve to recover their troops, recover their commandos who are dressed as Sunnis. The car bomb would go, and the impression would be that Sunnis have triggered a car bomb in the Shia district. Actually, it was the British SAS were doing. They were caught. The whole drama was documented. The story exploded, and the world came to know. Just like this documentary that you showed, this documentary showed that they were creating Shia militiamen. Similarly, the British SAS themselves, because in Iraq the resistance was Sunni, and the Shia because Saddam Hussein was Sunni and he was persecuting Shias, so Shias decided to side with the Americans to take revenge, to start the sectarian war. And now Iraq is almost divided into a small Sunni segment, Shia state and Kurdistan. So primarily what is happening is, but let me make it very clear to you, that while the Americans are supporting Shia and Sunni terrorist groups all over the Muslim world, the real threat to the Americans is from the Sunnis, not Shias.
How's that? How's that?
Exactly.
How are they more threatened?
I'll have to clarify that. You see, the point is that Sunnis are about 1.5 billion Muslims in the world. And there are about over 50 plus Muslim countries. There is only one Shia country. which is Iran, which is purely Shia country, that's Iran. Rest of them are Sunni countries, which have Shia populations, Shia pockets, but they're only one Shia country. And the population of Shias within the Muslims, 1.5 billion Muslims, is almost 10 to 12%. So
yeah, they make a small portion
very small minority,
of the entire Muslim world.
So they're almost, in 1.5 billion Muslims, you have about 10% or 12% Shias. So the Muslim world as a whole, if it poses a threat to the West, it's the Sunnis which pose a threat, because also of the political concept of Khilafat, of the Caliphate. You see, George Bush has actually made a speech, and you can, perhaps if you can find it, you can show it also, in which he had said that the Sunni Muslim terrorists are trying to create a global state called Caliphate. In fact, Caliphate is a mainstream Sunni concept. It is not a concept of Sunni terrorists, of Al-Qaeda or Ayman al-Zawahiri or Osama bin Laden types. No. So basically, the Ottoman Empire...
So this is a Sunni concept.
The Ottoman Empire was a Sunni empire. And Ottoman Empire also represented the Sunni political Islamic concept of Khilafat, Caliphate. And Caliphate is purely a Sunni concept, because Shia concept, the political concept of power in Shia is imamat, the concept of an imam.
Right.
And of course, since Shias are in minority, their concept of imamat is limited to within Shias also. So they do not pose as much as a threat to the dominant Western civilization and society and the American world order as much as the Sunnis pose the threat, because Bush has categorically said that they will not allow the recreation of one global Muslim state called Caliphate. Because during the Ottoman Empire, for example, it was an empire which stretched in 3 continents, and Muslim land, all 50-55 countries that you see today, did not exist during the Ottoman Empire, and Muslims were light-footed. Muslims in Central Asia could travel without visas and passport to North Africa, because that was one empire.
Now it has become more complicated.
And after the First World War, they divided the Ottoman Empire into almost these 40-50 countries that you see today. The nation states, first the Arabs were divided, and within the Arab lands, 30-40 Arab countries were created, the Arab League was created. And it was unthinkable within the Muslim political history that Muslims will be divided so much on the basis of geography, on the basis of ethnicity, on the basis of language. It was never done.
Mr. Zaid Hamid, let me ask you this also. You talked about Khilafat, the Sunni concept, and the Imamat, the Shia concept. So tell us, what is the major difference between the two sects that creates all this kind of confusion?
The difference has existed for the last 1400 years. I mean, it is again a political difference to start with. That the Sunni Muslims believe that after the Prophet, the 4 righteous caliphs, the Caliph Abu Bakr, may Allah be pleased with them, Caliph Umar, Caliph Osman, and Caliph Ali, the 4 righteous caliphs were the natural heirs to the Prophet. While the Shias believe that this should have started from Caliph Ali, not the first 3. They do not recognize the political power of the first 3 caliphs. This is a historic difference, it's an academic difference, it's a religious difference, and it has existed for the last 1400 years. But Muslims have, over the centuries, learned to coexist with each other. And as we said, in societies, Muslims have fought each other on sectarian lines, Muslims have coexisted also, Muslims have... In the past, there were major sectarian conflict with the Muslim world. Like Ottoman Empire was a purely Sunni empire, and the Safavids in Iran were purely a Shia empire. And Safavids and Sunnis fought for centuries with each other. So it's a history of these things. But the fact is that all these wars remained within the Muslim land. They were never part of the foreign policy of the Crusaders, the foreign policy of the West, to exploit these wars to divide the Muslim lands. It was never done in history before. This is almost for the first time that we see at such a scale. It was tried in the past, but at a very small scale. But at this scale, that reshaping of the Muslim lands is taking place. And I agree with the Turkish President Abdullah Gül, who has recently gave a statement that Muslim lands are almost being pushed into the Stone Age. And this is exactly what is happening. Iraq has become a Stone Age country. Syria is being turned into rubble. Afghanistan is rubble. All the Muslim lands where these sectarian ethnic wars are taking place, where the sectarian war does not exist, Americans create death squads which start this sectarian war. And this is something that we are seeing in Pakistan also. All the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan is actually Tehreek-e-Taliban Pentagon. It has been funded, sponsored, created by CIA for exactly the same purpose purpose: political war against the state of Pakistan and a sectarian war against the Shia sect. And this is what they are doing.
And since Pakistan is the second biggest populated Shia sect in the entire world, so this factor could be very damaging
exactly. You
for
see, Pakistan has been a very hard country for them.
After Iran, Pakistan holds the biggest
Pakistan is a
sect.
hard country. It's a nuclear armed state. We have given 100,000 dead in urban insurgency in the fourth generation war that had been deployed against Pakistan, but Pakistan was still standing. But this axis of sectarian militancy, sectarian violence, sectarian terrorism, especially in the urban environment where it burns down the cities, like for example recently as we saw the GHQ, the garrison city of Rawalpindi was put under curfew, and that is right next to the army headquarters. And if Rawalpindi gets down under curfew, it means the urban death gangs, urban terrorists have really entered the state of Pakistan, penetrated the state itself.
So let me ask you this then, Mr. Zaid Hamid, as we have reached into the recent massacre that happened in Rawalpindi on the 10th of Muharram, unfortunately. So you think that this sectarian factor is getting injected in Pakistan now, since Pakistan is the only Muslim nuclear power? So do you think it's a start of a new generation war as it started in Iraq?
There is absolutely no doubt in this that the sectarian war, which was deliberately instigated, triggered, supported, financed, organized, weaponized in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Egypt, is now being brought into Pakistan also. This almost, in fact, the militant groups which are fighting this sectarian war in Pakistan are exactly the same which are fighting the very state of Pakistan, the TTP. The umbrella organization remains the TTP, and then under them, as we said, there are smaller groups which have different names but same ideology, same sect, same militancy, same organization, same group, same funding, same backers, same financiers. So this is something that the state of Pakistan will have to be very, very careful about, because we have seen this in Iraq, we are seeing this in Syria. And now it is coming to Pakistan, using the sectarian card to implode the state from within, where the ethnic militancy of Balochistan, the urban war in Karachi, and the political religious insurgency of TTP has not been able to achieve. Those objectives now would be achieved through sectarian death gangs, which are being again funded and supported by CIA and RAW.
Right. So Mr. Zaid Hamid, this year that we saw on the 10th of Muharram, isn't it more alarming than having a terrorist attack where all the communities, they stay together, they stand united, and they fight against the terrorists? But this time they have put the communities against each other.
The timings are very important. As we said, Pakistan right now is the most vulnerable state, because for the last 10 years we are fighting an urban insurgency, we have given so much of death. Pakistan government has almost 5 months old now, and they're still confused. Prime Minister is totally lost. He's confused. He can't get a grips on the law and order crisis. The government cannot decide whether to talk to the insurgents or to fight the insurgents. There's no foreign minister in the country. There's no law minister. There's no defense minister. And Pakistan army is going to have a new army chief in a week's time. And this outgoing army chief is now handing over powers to the new one, and the army is waiting for a new policy doctrine. And under siege, army is being attacked from all sides while the army is trying to have a new leadership itself. So this is the most vulnerable time for Pakistan, in a time when Pakistan's entire power structure is in a flux, is right now soft, is indecisive, in a state of transition. And when this thing happens, at this stage, triggering of this incident of sectarian riots, sectarian insurgency, especially in the garrison town, which is the headquarters of the Pakistan army, this is a very dangerous sign. And
also I would like to know, Mr. Zaid Hamid, that in this recent incident of Rawalpindi on 10th of Muharram, the one thing that was used as a major tool was the social media, which created severe aftermaths even after the impact, and social media was severely misused regarding creating more tension. So are we ready for the social media? Is Pakistani nation equipped fully with the knowledge that is needed to be on social media?
You see, this is what is happening. Social media is one of the latest weapons which is being used by terrorist insurgents and sectarian insurgent groups, death squads. The government has not even been able to check the use of the mainstream media, where the mainstream media is being abused against the state itself. There are many television channels which are actually airing hostile content, which are actually attacking the army, which are actually giving airtime to the insurgents and the terrorists and inflaming the sectarian violence. It's actually happening on the mainstream media also. Because the fourth generation war requires that massive information war is also waged against the state in support of the urban death squads. And this is exactly what's happening in Pakistan. But this new dimension of actually using the social media, what the government did this time is they blocked all the cellular networks, cell phones, 2 days before the 10th of Muharram, which is the most sensitive time. So the terrorists and insurgents started to use social media to coordinate. And we have proof to show.
And just imagine if the cell phones would have been working, then what would have happened. But we will continue our discussion right from here. Viewers, stay with us. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back, viewers. We're talking on the sectarian factor that has been utilized on the Muslim world as a very damaging tool in devastating those Muslim countries. We have the example of Iraq, we have the example of Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, Egypt, Lebanon, and now we're seeing Pakistan, which is the only Muslim nuclear power and which holds the second biggest sect of Shia Muslims inside it. Now is Pakistan the target of the outside elements to be eliminated from the map of the Muslim world, or is there some international conspiracy that is working behind instigating and provoking the sectarian war induction inside Pakistan, for which we had a small example given on the 10th of Muharram? Is the nation of Pakistan ready to fight back with this war, to fight back the induction of sectarian war factors through the outside factor? Are we ready to handle the social media? Are we ready to handle the electronic media that can be used against us as the dangerous tools? Before Mr. Zaid Hamid, we continue with our discussion, we would like to show some more clips and some more documentary on the sectarian factor utilized by the outside factor. Let's have a look at that and then we will get back to our discussion.
These al-Qaeda terrorists and those who share their ideology are violent Sunni extremists. They're driven by a radical and perverted vision of Islam that rejects tolerance, crushes all dissent, and justifies the murder of innocent men, women, and children in the pursuit of political power. They hope to establish a violent political utopia across the Middle East, which they call a caliphate, where all would be ruled according to their hateful ideology. Osama bin Laden has called the 9/11 attacks, in his words, a great step towards the unity of Muslims and establishing the righteous caliphate. This caliphate would be a totalitarian Islamic empire encompassing all current and former Muslim lands, stretching from Europe to North Africa, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia. We know this because Al-Qaeda has told us. About 2 months ago, the terrorist Zawahiri, he's Al-Qaeda's second in command, declared that Al-Qaeda intends to impose its rule in every land that was a home for Islam, from Spain to Iraq. He went on to say, the whole world is an open field.
Yes, Mr. Zaid, as you saw the documentary on this, now seeing all this, the bigger, wider picture globally, we are already seeing, we have the examples of these countries that have been made dysfunctional. Now, if we analyze the Pakistan situation, what can be done? How can we fight back? What nation needs, what grooming this nation of Pakistan needs to be ready and stay united together against all these factors?
You see, one thing that you need to understand is that the war that is being imposed against Pakistan, which we have explained earlier also, is a fourth generation war, which has multiple dimensions, which has an economic dimension, which has an information war and media dimension, which has a political dimension, which has a judicial dimension, which has a military dimension. And within the military dimension, you have two or three types of militancies or insurgencies or rebellions which are waging war against the state. Ethnic, which, like for example in Balochistan, you have the Balochistan Liberation Army, which is purely secular, ethnic, based on, and they're trying to create a greater Balochistan with the help of Indian RAW and American CIA. Similarly, we have sectarian, and sectarian dimension also has foreign content into it. Sometimes you have the Iranian influence also, sometimes you have Saudi influence also, sometimes you have direct Blackwater's and CIA and the Indian elements also supporting the militant insurgent groups, creating death squads, behaving as sectarian militants, but in reality they're only the urban insurgents fighting against the state. And then we have the political religious militants who are fighting the very state itself, not on the basis of sect or ideology, but just because they're against the state, like the Khawarij and the Takfiris of TTP, Tehreek-e-Taliban, Pentagon. Now, so the state has to harden itself. It's not a question of fighting only the sectarian dimension. The state itself has to develop a comprehensive response. The government has to make laws. The parliament has to support the government in implementing those laws. The judiciary has to deliver the judgments based on those laws to punish the culprits. Special powers have to be given to the armed forces. The media has to be controlled to develop an information warfare, PSYOPs response. So it has to be a holistic response. But right now what we are seeing is that almost there is no government in Islamabad. And as we said, no foreign minister, no law minister, no defense minister, no chief of army staff at place, no judiciary. Judiciary is not even delivering judgments, and the government has even suspended and banned the death punishment, the capital punishment. As a result, the insurgents and sectarian terrorists and urban death gangs, they have an advantage over the state. The state is withdrawing, the urban insurgents are gaining ground. The intelligence agencies, even if they have intel, when the judicial system is not delivering, they are forced to pick up the insurgents and the terrorists. The judiciary comes after the intelligence agencies and
question them
and punishes the intelligence agencies and not the terrorists and the insurgents. So the security agencies are also under pressure from a fake, false, corrupt, collapsed judicial system and the political system in the country. So this is a very hopeless and dangerous situation for Pakistan. Pakistan's new army chief is expected in a week's time, and that would be a critical moment for this country, because Pakistan's army's new chief will bring a new doctrine how to respond to these threats, and it will depend entirely on him how much he can bring the government and judiciary media on board. If we have a general who has a vision, power, strength and capability to achieve it, then you can expect some positive response. Otherwise, we are going down the Syrian path, and that's deadly.
So if these are the major factors that should be taken care of at the leadership level. If we go into the community level, if we talk about the community improvement, we saw in Iraq last year that in September, the town of Ramadi, the Shia and Sunni community, they tried to offer a collective Friday prayers so that they can send out a strong message to the outside factors that, they are united, so the outside factor cannot exploit this Shia Sunni factor. But then the results were terrible. They did have some suicidal attacks after that. Don't you think that as a community in Pakistan, we should teach the people to have tolerance and have such kind of collective community work?
Pakistan is one of the most, in certain cases, one of the most tolerant countries in the world. You might find this might seem strange. There are 4 million Afghan refugees living in Pakistan for the last 30 years. And you have not found a single act of violence against these guests, Afghan refugees who are living all over the country. And they come from all ethnic backgrounds, all religious sectarian backgrounds, but they live comfortably in Pakistan. In the Pakistani society, as we said, in the Pakistan government, in Pakistani civil society, in industry, in commerce, in trade, in universities, in the armed forces, you never hear of any sectarian divide based or ethnic divide or linguistic divide. The state itself is very tolerant. The society is tolerant. What we are saying is that all this militancy and insurgency is being done by very small fraction of militant terrorist groups. Some homegrown, some foreign sponsored, but they are very small groups, and eliminating those groups is no problem. The rest of the society can have academic debates, discussions, disputes have been, discussions and debates and differences have been for centuries, but never violent. This new axis of urban militancy and the creation of death squads, which is mass murdering the opposite sect, whether they are Christians or whether they are non-Muslims or whether they are Shias or Sunnis. This mass slaughter is going on in Pakistan indiscriminately, and behind every slaughter you find a foreign sponsored death gang. So this is the point. Pakistan is under war. Pakistan is under attack. It's an urban insurgency going on in Pakistan, and it does not matter whether the acts as ethnic, acts as a sectarian or political religious. The fact of the matter is all links go to CIA and RAW emerging from Afghanistan.
So if you're saying that everything goes to CIA and RAW in Afghanistan, then where are our intelligence agencies? Like as we saw this Muharram, the 9th and 10th of Muharram, everything was proceeding peacefully, and at the end we find out this happening. So isn't our intelligence agencies, isn't our police, isn't our establishment, weren't they able to see what's going to happen?
You see, this is what is happening. What we are saying is we have an absolutely confused, disoriented and weak Prime Minister who is so indecisive that he cannot, after 6 months of being in power, he cannot even decide about a foreign minister or a law minister or a defense minister or an army chief for that matter. So with this level of indecision, which is actually flowing down at all levels, at all tiers of the government, even if there is intelligence, there is no action over it. This happens in Dera Ismail Khan jailbreak. Remember the incident in which hundreds of terrorists were actually released from Dera Ismail Khan jailbreak? The intelligence was there 3 days earlier. Everybody knew that jailbreak would take place. Still the jailbreak took place. And the entire administration simply collapsed because nobody was willing to take decision and responsibility. Point of the matter is that intelligence agencies, whether civil or military, can only give the intelligence. The responsibility lies with the government, and if the government doesn't exist, intelligence agencies cannot behave like governments, and this is the unfortunate tragedy that the Pakistan is facing today. That's why we are saying Pakistan first need a Prime Minister. Mr. Nawaz Sharif, it's a joke now that Mr. Nawaz Sharif has come on a tour of Pakistan, is going back again outside. He's spending more time outside the country than he's spending inside. And to worst of all, to cap it all, he does not have a defense minister, law minister, foreign minister or an army chief. With this kind of leadership, you don't expect a response. You expect chaos, and this is exactly what we're seeing.
And that chaos, we are already seeing it. So, Mr. Zaid Hamid, you said that the Prime Minister, then comes the intelligence agencies, and then comes the establishment and all the other prior departments. But then there are religious ulama in our country that also owe their responsibility towards the community in educating people towards this sectarianism, to teach them tolerance. Do you think that the ulama in Pakistan are sincerely deliberating those responsibilities?
One thing, as he said, you need to understand one very critical point. As we explained to you earlier, the problem in Pakistan, there are three major Sunni sects here: Deobandis, Barelvis and Ahle Hadith, and there's one Shia sect. In Sunnis, there are three subsects. The problem is not between Ahle Hadith and Barelvis. The problem is between Deobandi sect and Shias. And problem about these sects is that they only listen to a scholar of their own sect. Primarily is on Deobandi and Shia scholars, not on Barelvis or Ahle Hadith, because they're not even involved in the violence of whatever is happening here.
So if we focus on these two sects, then what can be done? What can they do to build up tolerance?
Within them, they definitely. But as we have seen, since most of these death gangs are foreign sponsored, even if a scholar from their own sect tries to stop them, he gets assassinated. And this has been happening in Pakistan. Some very good scholars who spoke against the sectarian violence, suicide bombings, terrorism, they got assassinated by the terrorists, even if they were from the same sect. So basically what we are saying is the state has to be strong, the state has to strengthen its institutions and organizations, and then strengthen the scholars who can stand up to the terrorists. Right now, if the state is so weak, even if a religious scholar stand up to the terrorists, he faces very serious consequences. And that's why we are seeing that even the religious scholars are not able to play their role, because they are unarmed, they are ordinary, decent, good scholars, but the militants, insurgents, death squads, they are ruthless. And so that's where the role of state becomes critical, which the Pakistani state is not doing at the moment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zaid Hamid. Viewers, as you saw that we tried to explain explore the pros and cons of different sects living in Pakistan, as we can see that we are in 21st century and Pakistan is facing the challenges that Pakistan has never faced before. One of the example was this 10th of Muharram in the Pindi massacre, where social media was used and exploited for a much severe sectarian injection into the community. So we must stand together to fight back so that no setback can set us back. That's all. If we all stay united, we can go and proceed further. That's it for today. Until next Sunday. See you all next Sunday. Until then, Allah Hafiz and good night.